Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Let's talk about luxury condos. Let's talk about luxury condo projects. Many people say luxury condos won't fix the housing crisis. There's a big, beautiful one going up in Ile-des-Sœurs, but one urban economist, Jean-Philippe Meloche, disagrees. He argues that increasing the overall supply, even with high-end units, can ease pressure across the entire market. Let's find out more. Jean-Philippe Meloche, he's a professor and director of the School of Urban Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Montreal, joins us on the line. Jean-Philippe, bienvenue.
Hi.
Great to talk to you here. And, I've been saying this for years on this show, but I'm just a dumb radio host. So nobody buys my arguments. I'm really happy to talk to someone with credentials on this one. So make the case. How does building luxury condos help low-income renters?
Well, we have two problems here on our housing market. One is that we have a shortage in supply, which means that we don't have enough supply so that people that are seeking a new house will find it easily. So if they cannot find it easily, sometimes they will probably try to put some more money when they find something. That's what pushed the prices up right now. And it pushes the prices up in every segment of market, which means that not only on the basic housing units, but also on luxury condos. So anything you put in the market, anything you put in the market to raise the supply will probably help to ease this problem. The other problem is at the end of the spectrum, we have some poor households that have difficulties to get into this market. And of course, they will say that these new condos will not help them directly because they will not be the renters of these condos or the buyers of these condos. But if we have a shortage, what we observe is that people that have money, people that are rich, will always find a housing unit. If they don't find it in luxury condos, they will just try to seek something else, and they will buy or they will rent something that maybe the middle class people will have rent, and people in the middle class will not find any housing units because it's crowded with rich people. So they will try to find something at the end of the spectrum. So they will probably rent some low housing unit, and that's where the problem is trickling down to low revenues household.
Why do you think when we have this discussion now in society, as we talk about the housing crisis, nobody believes you? The moment you bring up the word luxury condo, people just recoil in horror. I mean, I wonder sometimes if it's just the word luxury. Why do you think it's so difficult to convince people of your argument?
Well, I think there is a wrong interpretation of the math here. If you put more luxury housing units in the market, the average rent will be higher because you put some more expensive housing unit in your distribution, then the average will rise. And that's true. The average rent will rise. But that does not affect the rent of the lower units. It's just the average that is moving. If you don't put these units into the market, and then you have, I would say, you augment the population. So if population is increasing, and then you don't have more units, then people fight for the units that do exist, and then the price will rise. If you put more housing units into it, then they fight for more housing units. Then you don't have the same pressure on the market. But when you look at the average, if you put some luxury housing into your market or into your supply, then obviously the average will rise. But that doesn't mean that people that have lower revenues that will be affected by this average. They do have their unit, and the renting price of their unit is not necessarily moving.
Talking about the best way to solve the housing crisis with Jean-Philippe Meloche from University of Montreal. Jean-Philippe, what do you say to people who say, you know what, you're wrong, the solution is social housing and affordable housing that with capped pricing and rent limits? What do you say to those people that are convinced that that's the solution?
Well, they're not necessarily wrong, which I said there's two problems right now, and one affecting the other. We have a shortage in supply, which means that we need to build more units. Whatever you want to build it. That's the problem. But we will always have another problem, which means that we have standards in our society, a standard for what represents a decent housing unit. And some households don't have enough revenues to afford that housing. So even if you have a surplus in the supply and you have lots of empty housing units, you will always have some households that cannot afford the cheapest housing units on your market. And that's another problem. So we need to have public housing supply. We need to have subvention for the poor household that we have in our society. If we want every household to be housed in a decent housing unit, then we need to put some subvention, some public policies, and some public supply of housing units in our market to help these people. And the two solutions need to be put together to solve the problem we have right now, because we will always have the problem of, I would say, inequalities of access to housing. Even if we have an oversupply of housing, we will still have that problem. And we have a problem that is worsening that situation right now, is that we have a shortage in the supply of housing. So we need to solve that problem as well. So they're not wrong, but they're focusing only on one part of the problem. And I would say the problem is larger than that. So we need to do both.
We need to do both. It's funny, and I often hear that, right? When I have politicians on the show, I ask them what I believe is like a math question, and because I just want to see how they handle it. This is when I ever have a municipal politician on the show and we talk about housing. I always ask them, if you had a magic wand and you could take the magic wand and poof, create 100,000 luxury condos or 10,000 affordable housing units, which one would you build? And they can never give me a straight answer. they always like, well, we actually need to do both. And I said, but that's not the question. I want you to choose one, 100,000 or 10,000. Which one would be better? And they always struggle with the answer. Do you think that's why? Because there's multiple problems here?
Well, your question is one or the other. Mm-hmm. I could answer that question. 100,000 is better than 10,000, yep. Whatever. Yeah. That's the true answer. Yeah. But at the end, it's true that even if we put 100,000 new housing units on the market, we will still have homeless. We will still have people in the street. So it's not the same type of policy we want to favor here. Of course, the highest number of unit we build is the better, always. After that, we have to choose how much money we want to redistribute. So how much money we want to take from the rich and give to the poor to make sure that we don't have high inequalities in our society. That's a social choice. So if we have lots of units, this choice is easier to make. If we have a shortage in our supply in housing, well, we have a strong policy to put there because we have a higher number of people that are in need. And that's the problem right now that we have, is that we have more homeless people because the rich are having trouble to find their housing units. So we have to do both because we have two big problems. If we solve at least one of these problems, which if we have a very high production of housing units in the future, and then probably we'll solve part of the problem with this, and then we'll still have to answer the question, how much money do we take from the rich to redistribute to the poor?
One last question, and that is, does the building of luxury condos add to gentrification and then actually at the end of the day exacerbate issues? If it's not just about the luxury condo being built, it's about a whole neighborhood becoming quote unquote gentrified.
Well, gentrification usually is based not necessarily on condo construction. It is based on something that happened in the neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood that used to be dangerous and then you secure the neighborhood, then you change the way we see that neighborhood. People that used to avoid that neighborhood will go there. And if they want to go there, they may want to buy a house there. They may want to live there. So that's change the demand for housing in that neighborhood. If you build some luxury condo in that neighborhood to cap or to drag this demand into these condo, then you will probably have less gentrification than if you don't build these condo. Because the rich can buy anything. They can buy a small house, a big house, a condo. They buy what they want. So if the neighborhood change its identity from an insecure to secure neighborhood, and then the rich people like that, well, if you don't build condo for them, they'll buy the other supply that exists in the neighborhood, and that will increase gentrification. So sometimes people think that it's the condo that's changed the face of the neighborhood. Usually the neighborhood is changing. That's why we build these condo, and these condo help to take the new demand and drag this demand into new housing units instead of having the demand going to the existing supply and then accelerating the gentrification of that neighborhood. So gentrification never comes from the construction of new condos. In fact, it comes from something else. And usually building new condos will help to slow down the gentrification instead of accelerating it. And sometimes people think that the condo is the gentrification, and that's a misinterpretation of what gentrification is in reality.
Jean-Philippe, we do have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
My pleasure.
That's Jean-Philippe Meloche. He's director of the School of Urban Planning and Landscape Architecture at University de Montreal.